Hello, welcome back to Off the Rack Rebellion, the podcast where we talk about costuming and how to take everyday finds and incorporate them into your everyday cosplays. Hello, Billy. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Oh man, we're both post events and we're both catching up on things, but I'm doing
Yeah,
good.
catching up on recording, catching up on stuff. A little bit of a breath, right?
Yes.
After having to, yeah.
Yeah, totally. And there is something that had been heavy on my mind. We'll talk about kind of the events that we've been at in another episode, but I did just have Emerald City Comic Con not too long ago, and one of the things I was working on or contemplating working on was revamping an old cosplay that I have of the Jedi from Legends, Nomi Sunrider. And
Okay.
so I kind of went down a rabbit hole like what did the Jedi used to look like? What have they looked like? And what could they potentially look like?
Right.
Um, and so it was a big rabbit hole, which was probably why I didn't get that cosplay revamped, but that's fine.
Now
There
this
were
is
just so many.
not an area of my expertise.
Yeah. And it definitely wasn't one of mine either. And I feel like this is just scratching on the surface, especially when you
Right.
go into the Legends material. There's just so much. But it was so interesting for me to look and be like, you know, as somebody who gravitates more towards the denizens, I feel like one reason why the Jedi look isn't as appealing to me is because it's kind of boring.
I wasn't gonna say it. I wasn't gonna be the
I'm
one to
gonna
say it, so I'm
go
glad
ahead,
you
send
did.
me your hate mail. I think the Jedi look boring.
Glad you did. I wasn't gonna be the one to say it. I was gonna try to be as positive as possible.
No, and I'm positive.
No, of
I'm
course, I know. Yeah.
I'm saying that in a very loving way, but I do joke about, like, the space monk look, and I'm like, "Yeah, come
Right,
on."
right. Well,
You
I
know?
think I think it's important to make the distinction that, just flipping through this stuff, a lot of this stuff is not canon, right?
Yes. It's not canon
And
anymore at
I
all,
will
like
say that, like, what isn't canon is probably much more interesting
yeah,
than
yeah,
what is actually canon.
yeah. So
Because
I
we
w
get a lot of space monk stuff in the
yes.
canon, but we get a
Yeah.
lot of, like, different sort of
Yeah.
stuff in the
Yeah,
legends.
totally. So I wanted to just revisit I'm also now that I'm, like, winding down from Emerald City Comic Con, I'm gearing up for Space Dive. And not that
Yeah.
I'm going as a Jedi for that at all, but it just thinking about different colors, thinking about different fabrics, thinking about the things that
Mhm.
we like to think about, linen and leather, right? Like these accessories. I went down a definite rabbit hole being like, "Oh god, I remembered the artwork from the Tales of the Jedi comic books, like, and we'll get into it. I've got slides. I have slides, I have
Okay.
notes, I went way too into it. Um, so yeah, and I loved the possibility of what was and what could have been with
Right.
Jedi, and I wanted to explore that. So I was gonna figure out how to do this again. Here we
There we
go. I think
go.
Raimi's figuring out how to do it. So, first of all, Star Wars cover art is such a wonderful genre. I like the comics and the books. I have such a soft spot for these artists in my mind. But the colors that we used to get associated with the Jedi back in the 90s have such a special place in my memory.
Okay.
And so these are a couple of different covers from the Tales of the Jedi, which the comics were released by Dark Horse Comics from 93 to 98. And also from 93 to 94, Marvel had a stint. And I don't know the
Mhm.
politics behind that, but that's the
I think it's
facts.
the dark ages of Star Wars, and they were just selling the property
Yeah, yeah,
whoever they
possibly.
could, yeah.
Totally.
Not
Something
selling the
like
property, but, like, licensing it
yeah.
to whoever
Mhm.
wanted to do something, yeah.
Totally, totally. So in the Tales of the Jedi, the plot line is around the Great Sith War and the Great Hyperspace War.
Mhm.
And they at the time were the earliest tales prior to the Dawn of the Jedi series, which came out in 2012, 2014.
Okay.
But this timeline was like almost 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. So I
Okay.
thought it was really fascinating how they were trying to show passage of centuries in
Mhm.
fashion in Star Wars, right?
Right.
And so, we can let me see, we'll click to the next slide. and we might go to the next slide. But, I think we see a lot of, tunics and cloaks and things that look more like leather armor, um,
Okay.
and so I think that that's pretty here we go, I think I can get it. Yeah, there
Yeah,
we
there we go.
go. It's more of the covers. So, on the far left, you're seeing, like, this armor that really reminds me of, like, samurai, right? Is that, like
Mhm.
me, I
It's almost
see, like
like plated, like, it's sort of joined together plates,
yeah,
almost like
plates.
scales, right?
Totally, yeah, and I was
Yeah.
definitely thinking kind of like that armor that we see. I also love the tattered kinda, like, wrap that's around his waist here, that crimson color.
I love a
Um
tattered wrap.
Uh-huh, right? And, like, in contrast with that blue tunic.
Mhm.
In the middle, it's so sci-fi armor, and I love that.
Mhm.
It's like it's very pulpy, and it's very, like, the gold against the green again is very and I think it's probably supposed to be that same blue tunic, but just in a different lighting.
Is
But,
that the
like,
same guy?
I think it's the same guy. There's 2 brothers, and I always forget,
Oh, okay.
like yeah, I think it's the same guy, and I have read a couple of these back in the day when I was a kid, but not the entire arc, and I, like, just knew of the characters basically through the character encyclopedia, but,
Sure.
um, this helmet thing, this, like, whole, like, wrap around the face, like, helmet thing that goes under his chin there,
Yeah.
it's so very, like what would
But
a
it's very
sci-fi
comic
helmet
book,
look it's very
doesn't it?
comic
It's
book.
very, like,
It reminds me of
Marvel
yeah, I was gonna
superhero.
say, it reminds me of something
Yeah.
you'd see in X-Men for some reason,
Yes,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
That's
think
kind
that
of like,
X-Men
Cyclops'
yes,
sort of
like
thing,
Cyclops,
yeah,
yeah, and I
or
think that
Gambit.
X-Men was very I was having a very like, that's when the cartoon was out, right? And,
Mhm.
like, I think there was a very big comic series at that time, and so I'm like, "Oh, wow," historically in our timeline, like, where is this coming from and what are they putting in how are they
Right,
trying to put historical context through clothing in that century and where are they pulling
right.
from? I thought that was fascinating.
And these
Also
are
these
also comics, so they
mhm,
do kind of have to just to, draw in the your average,
mhm,
comic reader, you have to
totally.
kinda draw them in with something that's familiar to them as well,
Yeah,
especially if you want them to try a
yeah,
different kind of story in a different franchise,
yeah, yeah. You have to draw them in with something familiar, but also, "Whoa, what
Mhm.
is that? I need to know more." Right?
Right.
And then this one that's far on the right with this it's very I mean, like, I very knight. It's very, like, traditional,
Mhm.
like, European, like, big
Yeah, with the
hulking knight.
spikes and stuff, yeah.
Right? Yeah, we do not see that in our current and I don't know which character that is in I
Right,
have an idea of who it might be, but I don't know for sure which one that is. But I was just like, "Oh, wow." Like, that's it's also totally I feel like fantasy novels had a really big and not that they're not still around now, but there was a certain draw to a fantasy novel in the '90s as well, and I feel like they were pulling from that too, trying to get like, "Let's get some fantasy readers."
right.
So then they did a prequel after these, called, um the Golden Age of the Sith, and so that it was a prequel, and look at these ancient Egyptian vibes.
Right,
Like
yeah, very sort of
right?
tribal, very, Egyptian, very yeah,
Yeah, right, and, like, I
very
mean, it's
ancient
just
peoples, yeah.
very ancient peoples, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, where would as an artist" try to because you are trying to pull things from what we know so that it kinda clicks something in your mind, and they're like, "Yeah, ancient Egypt is where we're going with this. Because I love her asymmetric skirt, like, different layers of the
Mhm,
skirt, and she's got that big gold collar in the
mhm,
left side, and some sorta headdress that's kinda coming down on both sides.
mhm.
It's giving very Cleopatra at a Halloween party vibes, right?
Yeah,
Like, it's not historical, but it's what you might pin as, "Oh, you must be dressed as Cleopatra." If I went to Comic Con dressed like this, I think that's what people would probably think because not many people know about I mean,
right.
unless you were a comic book fan back in the day, right? And she's got the leg wraps, but with the bare foot. I think
Mhm,
that's just some I mean, we don't see often. We talk about sandals, the examples we do have of sandals, and this is one I'm like, "Oh,
right.
sandals." And in the middle, the guy, he's got like that kinda cone chin thing coming
Oh,
out that you
right.
see, right? You see him kind of on the left-hand side
Right,
there in the
very
center?
Pharaoh, very
It
yeah.
is, right? And, like, the whatever, the hat
This
that
is
he's
bizarre.
wearing. I know, but this was Star Wars at one point in time, and I'm always fascinated by what has hung on as what is Star Wars and what is not Star Wars, and at one point in time, this was Star Wars, and this is what we could this is what could have lasted. It's crazy to me. So, yeah, I love her, like, she's got this gold you see more of that gold headdress in the middle where it's
Mhm.
got the geometric pattern. I just think it's so funky and cool. The headdress on the far right with these huge it's almost Loki-like, right? Like, with these hu
Right.
or like Wolverine, with these huge, like, wings coming up and this gold headdress that's, like, enveloping her, it's so big.
Yeah, yeah.
But the
Very Egyptian, very yeah.
very Egyptian, and the colors just stood out to me, these reds and blues and golds, and they're so bright, and I was like, "Wow, we have gone so muted," which is fine. I prefer a muted color, a more rusty color or a more faded color, for myself, but these are such striking colors that they really grab your attention, and they're really fun, the juxtaposition of them is really fun. These, like, almost like pure primary colors. I think it's very fascinating.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so let me go to the next one. We'll see where these went. So then I've kind of jumped ahead a little bit to this Dawn of the Jedi series that I mentioned, which came
Mhm.
out in 2012, 2014 from Dark Horse Comics. So it is set 36,453,
Wow.
gotta be exact, years before A New Hope.
Wow.
So there, and then you jump, if you look from like these early 90s styles to these styles, I think it's so funny that I'm like, "Oh, yeah, this is kinda run-of-the-mill comic book character, superhero villain looks to
Right,
me." You know what I mean? It's like something that might be a leather armor. Um
right. Especially the one on the right, like, that doesn't look
Yeah.
like anything.
Yeah, it looks very basic, right?
Like a
Yeah.
clown face
Yeah.
almost. Oh, no, no, no.
I
I
wasn't sure.
just zoomed in. It's
Yeah,
weird,
yeah.
but geometric thing. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that a clown face? Is that
I know, I just thought the same
Harley
thing too. I was like, "Is
Quinn
this
in Star
Ronald
Wars?
McDonald?" Yeah. Is this a mashup? What is this? Um, but it was really interesting that I was like, "Oh, wow," like, in the '90s, they were really in that era of we're still throwing anything at the wall and just seeing what sticks, right? And
Right,
here they're like, "Okay, this is a little more superhero Star Wars," you could believe it for what we've come to know what should look like Star Wars. At least that's what I think. It's cleaner line, it's like, yeah,
right.
but it's fascinating stuff, like, oh man.
It's
Um,
crazy to me that this ran 2 years into Disney acquiring it, like, 'cause they bought
yeah,
it in 2012 and that they let this run for 2
yeah,
years.
yeah, you gotta wonder if they had a contract that, like, was
I
like,
think
"Well,
they
if
probably
you
did.
want to
Yeah,
change
yeah.
that
I feel
contract,
like
that's already in the mix."
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. I know, and I have not read any of these, so I don't know these characters, I don't
Right.
know much about this at all. Just the juxtaposition to me to be like, "Oh my gosh, so this is what more modern artists and authors were like, yeah, this is what they would have looked like in ancient times," whereas, like, the '90s was like, "We're going to Egypt, baby. Get your
Yeah.
passport." Oh my gosh. So, and then, most recently, we've had the High Republic books and the
Right.
Acolyte TV show for our modern canon. What did the Jedi used to look like? And so
Right.
now they've really streamlined it and wanted to connect it much more with what we see in the prequels, right?
Mhm.
So,
Tunics,
and
tabards, yeah.
yeah, yeah, which is completely different than what anybody had done. Um, and we got very excited about when we were like, "Wow, look at the colors." Remember when we
Right.
did, like, we were like, "Oh my gosh, there's slightly different variations," but it's very uniform and things like that, and we know, they were trying to build this very strict order, very, this is how you do things. This is the visual language of our Jedi culture,
Right,
right?
because we at least we forget they're a religious
They're a
sect.
religious sect, yeah,
So, they're
exactly.
not like,
With rankings in it, yeah, and so you
right, they're
had to
not like
follow.
super, like, individual, like,
Mhm.
um, heroes or whatever.
Yeah.
They're literally a religious sect,
Yeah.
so they kinda have to have
Yeah.
some semblance of
Yeah,
uniform.
some uniform. I think of modern day clergy, right? Like, they have
Right,
their different hats mean different things, different stoles mean different things, right?
right,
And so it makes sense why they went that way. It's just always fascinating to me to be like, "Oh, wow, the Jedi Knights originally were this much more loose concept of almost like Dungeons& and Dragons characters, we formed this party, we're going on a quest, somebody's got a sword, right? Like, and
right.
now it's like, oh, Jedi Knights were space monks with swords. So it's just always I just love the juxtaposition of the 2, it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah,
So and then I wanted to show some of our Jedi from
from the
the prequel,
prequels?
and there was variation in them. It was just a very muted color palette. And I think did I add it in the notes where I was like, "Oh, I didn't add it in the notes." It's kind of almost we talked about this in our book club, I believe, of like, had the Jedi kinda lost their sense of fun a little bit by that era of, like it's like, "Oh, no, we're so plugged in. This is what we do. Like, we're the
No,
space monks."
I think
Like
you're absolutely right because the High Republic books, just even in the use of the Force,
mhm.
they're a lot more interpretive,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
everyone sort of has like a special way that they connect to it. While I think as it gets more and more dogmatic,
Yeah.
so do the garments. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that in our book club when we read The Living Force. Like, yeah, like how they connected to it and how they talked about it and how they utilized it was yeah. We're like, "Oh, man, there's, like, such a difference in the mindset." And that also
Hmm.
shows passage of time, right? Like,
Hmm.
beliefs change over the decades and the centuries and it's true in religions that are on earth right now that they have
Hmm.
evolved over decades and centuries. So it is really interesting, that the costumers can help display that, I think. So, and then kind of in our timeline after these folks is the original Jedi that we all knew was only
Hmm.
Obi-Wan Kenobi, was Ben
Hmm.
Kenobi. Where often, because the folks on Tatooine, and we've talked about this, are also in those, you know, earth-toned, wrapped, textured linen fabrics, right? It was
Hmm.
like, for the longest time, I was like, "Gosh, he's dressed kind of like like Uncle Owen," you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it was like yeah, and I was like, "Oh." So at this point in time of costuming, I'm often curious, like, if they meant to make Obi-Wan Kenobi look like a desert dweller, or if somebody was like, "No, no, no, this is what Jedi should look like." You know what I mean? I'm always very
I
curious
think it's a
about that.
little column A, a little
Little
column
column A,
B.
little column B for sure.
I think they made him I think they I mean, don't quote me on this, but I think they originally made him look like a desert dweller,
Mhm.
and then I think
Yeah.
your boy George,
I think
um, when he made the prequels was like,
Mhm.
"No, that's what they all look
Yeah,
like," and
I
it's
think
like, why
so,
would he be
totally.
hiding in
In
yeah,
plain sight. I know. This is the one and
George,
I
what are you doing?
never yeah, totally. I love Star Wars, I love Star Wars, I love Star Wars, but that is the one thing I'm always like, "Really? You couldn't have given him any other outfits?"
There's a funny video going around, it's this creator who does a series of videos of like just two normal dudes, or I forget what it's called, but it's like just two normal dudes, and he'll insert himself in like famous scenes of movies. And they did one for the cantina scene,
Oh, I love it.
and they're just sort of talking about everyone in the cantina. And when they get to Obi-Wan, they're like, "That guy kinda looks like a Jedi." And then he's like, "No, it can't be a Jedi because everyone's looking for them to kill them. Like, why would this guy be dressed as a Jedi? That's crazy." And then he ignites his lightsaber and he's like, "Whoa, he was a Jedi. That's crazy. That's bold. Bold to be just dressed like a Jedi," you know?
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah, totally. No, and I think that we kinda when they made Obi-Wan, right, like, they showed him in more Star Wars plain clothes at the beginning when he's, like, working in the factory, right? Like, processing, like, he's much more in just, like, a
Right.
tunic and things like that, where they're like, "Oh, we need to look like he's in hiding because we
Right. Right, right,
like
right. Right.
which
Why do you
I
go
don't think I
back?
included anything of that, I should
Yeah.
have. And then so then we get after Obi-Wan is gone, then Luke is the last, you
Mhm.
know? And I feel like he's a little bit of a rebel child in this black, which I understand the symbolism of this whole costume, and I
Mhm.
do still love it. But I love that he was like, "Well, if I'm the only one, I don't know any different. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
wear what I want," you know?
Right.
And, like, we get this very, very slim, very dark, very it's not embellished. There's not a lot of detail that we see until that white flap opens when you do get the symbolism of, the light side being present. Um but I just think that that is fascinating of like, oh, well, the the order of the Jedi is gone, so you do what you want.
Right.
Like,
No
and
one's
then he went back
pulling strings.
to the robes later on, which I think is oh yeah, he took a little bit from Han, little notes from Han. Um, so then I think that when we get Rey and they go completely white as symbolism, I believe, um, it was kind of fascinating that they were like, "Well, she's again the last of the kind. We're gonna let her keep her style because with her raps and things, it's like she was like pulling things from like previous parts of her wardrobe. But then going with all white, which by the way, cosplaying as Rey is such a pain in the butt with these wraps, and they're always like everywhere. I don't wear my Rey costume anymore, and that's why because like the drapes are just like
Do
they're
they yeah,
always
they move
everywhere.
around everywhere?
They
I'm
do,
sure
and
it's
I've
a
got
pain
them
in
like
the costume.
I've got, snaps incorporated up here so
Uh-huh.
I can take it off and so I can wash the shirt and stuff like that, but it's still, like there's, like, these big loops that are always, like, always around you, and I'm like, "Oh my god, it's one of the harder cosplays in my opinion." But I think that that's interesting that they made, like, Luke was in complete black in that final movie of that trilogy, and they were like, "We're going complete white with Rey for symbolism."
Mhm.
And so and that they did let her, like, pull from different aspects of her previous wardrobe, which then
Right.
and I haven't gotten into anything in Ahsoka or anything like that. I definitely, like, bridged over that in the cartoons and things like that because I was just touching
Oh, or
on
like Cal Kestis as well,
or
who
Cal
has,
Kestis.
like yeah,
Yeah,
101
who
looks
has I
actually.
know, I started to dive in there, I was like, "This is big. This is totally big."
Yeah.
And I haven't gone there, but and I do love that there's so much variation in those. Um,
There's some good stuff in
yeah,
the second game. Well, I
okay,
mean, both of them are good, but he has one outfit in the first one pretty much. I mean,
yeah,
there's variations in color, but it's essentially the same sort of loadout and then different sort of color ponchos over top if you wanted to wear a poncho. But the second game has a lot of
okay,
variation, more sort of rebel looks, more
mhm,
kind of you can change planet to planet depending on the
okay,
planet that you go to. Um, and there's some really good stuff in there.
right. Which
Yeah,
because I don't play the games, but I know
yeah.
of the character. He's a Jedi in hiding, right? Like,
He
isn't
is a
that
Jedi in hiding, yeah.
which makes so much sense that he's changing his clothes. Like,
There
I've
are
seen
some, like, that you can unlock that where he just looks like a Jedi, but,
oh, that's so
it's
funny,
not
yeah.
really in the game. Like, when you look
Yeah,
at him, he probably looks quite weird, I think, to anyone that encounters him, because he sort
okay,
of wears something that I think is quite outside of what anyone else would be wearing.
okay,
Um, so you'd either sort of say, like, "You're definitely not from here," or "You're definitely some other kind of person." And
okay,
then obviously
okay.
he's got, you know, a lightsaber on his hip, so
Yeah, yeah, which give it away,
that's
yeah.
a dead giveaway
Yeah,
always.
right, right,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, I love whenever I do see the artwork from those games or a cosplayer that's Cal Kestis or something like that, I love the looks, I love the colors, I love, like, textures, yeah, for sure. So my next, like, this whole train of thought in my head was, where are they going? Because
Mhm.
we're supposed to be someday getting a movie about Rey, right? Like, in the post post, pre or post sequel era,
Right.
um, where are the Jedi gonna go? Like
I
with their
hope
wardrobe.
they I hope they continue the trend of, it being sort of very individual,
Yeah.
to the character. I think, we get sort of hints of that with Cal Kestis, obviously,
Mhm,
but, I don't think that Rey would have the references to sort of
mhm,
say, "We're all gonna wear
mhm.
tunics, tabards, and
Yeah,
cloaked hoods," like
yeah,
or hooded cloaks.
yeah,
Um, so I'm hoping that we see something that's a little more, you know, functional
yeah,
and individual to the person, you
yeah,
know? She's
same.
also not afraid to carry a blaster, which I think is great.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
She's very comfortable with that. Yeah, same. I am definitely hoping that if we see somehow she's bringing the Jedi Order back, it's not quite the Jedi strict order, right? Like, so
Right, I just think she
very
wouldn't
curious about
have the
that.
reference. She would have
Yeah,
seen Luke
yeah,
once.
mhm, yep,
Yeah.
true. Yeah, yeah, so maybe that fashion era has died. Oh, yeah. So that's just where this is how my brain works sometimes, Billy, is I'm, like, working on
Yeah.
something, "Oh, wait, I wonder what oh, wow, look at that. Okay, what else is oh, wow. Look at how different these
I
2
do
are.
love
Well, then
Luke's
what came next?"
I do love Luke's, look the last time we see him when he has the battle with Kylo.
Mm,
The very last time that we see him, he's sort of
yeah,
wearing, he's sort of in a light blue tunic
yeah,
with a dark blue kind of over I don't quite know if
yes,
it's a cloak with a hood or not. I'm not
yeah,
remembering right now, but, probably one of my favorite Luke looks.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I didn't include it, I'm so sorry. It was a good look. It
It was
definitely
good.
was, like it definitely I felt it was very, like, casual Luke, very, like,
Mhm.
I'm showing up as Luke more than I'm showing up as a Jedi, right?
Right.
Like, yeah.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Which I think maybe a little bit of that black costume is that as well.
Oh, yeah,
Like a
totally.
streak of individuality to Luke, which I think is
That's what I
great.
definitely, like, acquired from that when I thought I was like, "Oh, yeah, like, they just put him in all black and he that's a blank slate." You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, he was just like, "Yeah, this is just where I'm going." Like, yeah. Yeah, totally. So, well, thanks for going down that little a little thought process with me. But this and I know we don't touch on the Jedi often, and I think that that's one reason why is because, like, there is this, like, "Well, this is Jedi," like,
Right.
thought process, and we're like,
Right.
"Oh, yeah." I mean, that's self-explanatory. You look at him, you're like, "Yeah, you're a Jedi." This random
Yeah,
guy in the bar,
I
that's a
have a
Jedi.
build I have a build for a Jedi that's like, I don't know if I'm ever really gonna wear that. I have
Mhm.
pictures and everything. I've never debuted it. I've never,
Yeah.
like, well, I've shown it to a few people, but, like, it's, like, there, it, like, looks like a Jedi, but I think that's what, like, also, like, kind of gets me where it's like, "Okay, this is just outside of what we know, but
Mhm.
still close enough that it's just visually like, oh, okay, you're obviously a
Yeah.
Jedi." And there's something about it that's like, I'm like, I don't know if it's quite my thing
Yeah.
anymore." Even though I have, like,
Yeah.
I have lightsabers, I
Mhm.
have, 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Um yeah, I've got everything in place
Yeah. I'm the
to
same.
do one.
I
I just don't know if
definitely
I am.
back in the day, I think during the pandemic, I was, like, looking at my fabric being like, "Oh, I could do a Jedi," because I know that the Saber Guild, who I do still think I contemplate going to their open lightsaber night, and I think I might jump on and just go have some fun because I didn't stop by and do their workshop at Emerald City Comic Con, which I usually do every year, but I was just busy. Um, and it's fun, right? It's fun, but I have looked into their costume requirements, and I'm like, okay, I know what colors they kinda require to,
Okay.
visually keep it Jedi
Right.
opposed to the Sith, and I'm always like, if I joined, I'd probably be a Sith.
Right.
'Cause there's much
Right.
more they have more leeway in what they can do. Because the Jedi need to have the tabards, it needs to have the tunic, it needs to
Right.
certain things crossing where the Sith, the requirements are much looser because they want to look
True.
like they're rebels, different kind of rebels, like, they
Right.
wanna look like they're individuals. Yeah, so it is funny because there was one point in time I was like, "Oh, these colors are on their chart," and then I was like, "Am I really a Jedi? I don't think I'm a Jedi."
I
I
don't know.
also
I
talked
think
to
the
my
more I know, the more the more I learn about Jedi, I'm like, I don't know if I wanna
Yeah, 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 totally,
Jedi
yeah,
either. Like, yeah.
right, yeah, yeah, I think we found our niche with the, denizens for sure. Troublemakers on the ground. But it is always fun to remember that, like, yeah, this whole story was kinda centered around the history of the Jedi, originally, right?
Right. Right.
So, yeah.
That really kept it going.
Yeah. And I understand the people that gravitate towards, like, that's where they connect, and it's wonderful that we all have some
And
aspect.
lightsabers are awesome.
Oh,
Like,
like,
they're
they're
so
so awesome. I
cool.
talked myself out of buying a new one this weekend, and I kinda regret it still. But, yeah, totally, they're cool, I get it, I wanna go play with them, so, I know, I'll probably show up at the
I should charge mine. Mine are
thing.
just sitting there, and I feel weird about the batteries not being charged,
Oh,
even though
yeah,
if I
mine
don't use it.
right. Mine are also in this closet. They just take batteries put in them, so they're not great. They're just, secondhand ones I got off of eBay, so but anyway, so, maybe we'll never be Jedi, Billy, but got the lightsabers.
We too. Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah,
that's it for Jedi. So,
yeah. Hopefully, I
where
didn't
can they
offend
find
anybody
you?
too much.
Oh,
Well, if they
no,
have a
no.
complaint, they can find me.
Yeah, there we go.
I am Kate Ryder. I am at One Scavenger's Wardrobe on Instagram, and I'm at just simply One Scavenger over on Blue Sky.
Yeah. I'm Billy Maddox, wherever you look for me, Instagram or Blue Sky. And thanks so much for the Dad Batch, and thanks so much to Raimi for being our producer and always helping us out with these episodes. And remember that a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away can be right here and right now.